Okay, Danielle, if you want to go ahead with your introduction, and then we'll kick it off and we'll leave it to Adam.
All right. Thank you, Ron. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for being here. My name is Danielle, and I'm here with our team of interpreters from Rosetta Languages. This is the first time we're doing this hybrid, so thank you all for bearing with us as we're trying something a little bit new here. And what we're going to ask is for everyone to join a language channel tonight. So English speakers as well. You will be joining in English channel if you're on Zoom. If you're in person, don't need to do anything because you will hear us through this big screen up there in front of you. But anyone who is on Zoom, you will be joining the English channel so that you can hear us if we're interpreting anything from other languages into English. And with that, we will give the instructions in all of the different languages. And I will start with Arabic. Assalamu alaikum wa ahlan wa sahlan bikum ila هذا الاجتماع. اليوم عندنا ترجمة باللغة العربية. إذا أردتم أن تستمع إلى الترجمة عليك أن تنزل تطبيق زوم على الهاتف. ولدينا مساعدين هنا في القاعة من برا هيساعدوكم عشان تدخلوا على البرنامج وحتى تدخل على قناة اللغة العربية وتسمع الترجمة الفورية. شكرا جزيلا. I will now pass it over to Analia to give the instructions in Spanish.
For our interpreters, can you, sorry, just 1 second. We're going to hold off for 1 second because, Danielle, they could not hear you. So which channel are you in right now?
I am on the English channel right now. You can also take us off the channels if that is easier for the introduction.
You at home. They're chiming in from home. That's okay because I think we are, we should be good to go. For those, again, we're going to test this one more time. For those on Zoom, give a hand raise if you can hear me right now. Oh, hold on. Okay, and then, yep, so we're good to go there. So I think it would just might be an interpreter issue, but that's okay because for those that are listening in, you can join your appropriate language channel. But go ahead, we're gonna move forward with those introductions anyway. I'm not sure at this point what the issue is, but we'll move forward.
Buenas tardes para todos, no sé si me pueden oír. Mi nombre es Analia, yo soy intérprete de español. Estamos aquí con el equipo de Rosetta Languages. Estamos tratando algo nuevo, así que estamos intentando hacerlo lo mejor posible y caminando un poquito con todo el mundo. Lo que le vamos a pedir a todos es que si están por Zoom, por favor, únanse al canal de inglés. Así pueden escuchar las preguntas o las preocupaciones que las otras personas tienen. Si no hablan su idioma, si no hablan en inglés, si ustedes escuchan en inglés, van a poder escuchar la traducción que nosotros hacemos. Y los que hablan español tienen que unirse al canal que dice español. Y ahí nos van a poder escuchar. Si están por Zoom, si están en persona, no tienen que hacer nada porque nos van a poder escuchar por la pantalla principal.
Now let's pass it over to Brandon for Portuguese.
Boa noite, gente. Eu vou ser um intérprete de português, então para quem precisa de interpretação em português, se tiver no computador, vai clicar na parte do globinho, né? E daí, se tiver no celular, vai clicar nos 3 pontinhos, escolher a interpretação, depois escolher português. Muito obrigado.
And let's pass it to Nikita for Haitian Creole.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Mon nom c'est Nikita Lamo. Moi là assoir avec Rosetta Languages pour nous traduire pour nous interpréter pour un meeting à Roosevelt Park là. Soit regarder en personne, pas besoin de faire rien, ou tout déjà là ou après nous en personne. Mais sur en computer, soit fait, ou regarder globe blanc, ou peser, ou regarder petit bouton qui marque globe blanc, qui dans bord droite écran, ou choisir créole. Parfois Haitian Creole là, il faut marquer French too. So ça peut venir monter, on va choisir. Si connecté avec Zoom dans téléphone, ou bien 3 petits points, dans le coin en bas, à droite écran, côté qui marque mort, ou choisir interprétation, en language interpretation, ou choisir Haitian Creole ou bien en French. So si vous choisissez langue là, vous allez m'écouter et puis laissez ça, ou moyen donne, ou peut écouter qui marque donne. Si vous avez n'importe question, ou capable d'écrire dans chat là, n'a pas répondre. Merci. Kounya n'a passé, nous passer to Terry in Mandarin.
Đặc sĩ Vietnamese, good evening. This is Lynn, the Vietnamese interpreter. Xin chào quý vị, tên tôi là Linh. Tôi sẽ là người phiên dịch tiếng Việt của Roosevelt Languages cho quý vị hôm nay. Một khi chúng tôi đã kích hoạt tính năng phiên dịch, xin vui lòng bấm vào biểu tượng quả địa cầu trên màn hình và chọn ngôn ngữ là tiếng Việt Vietnamese sẽ được nghe phiên dịch trực tiếp. Nếu quý vị đang dùng điện thoại thông minh smartphone, xin bấm vào 3 dấu chấm rồi chọn ngôn ngữ phiên dịch Language Interpretation, rồi chọn tiếng Việt Vietnamese và sau đó là Done. Xin cảm ơn quý vị. Now I pass on to Mandarin Terry. Thank you.
Thank you. 大家好，我叫 Terry。
Okay, thank you to all our interpreters. And before we get
Oops,
started,
Terry's giving his instructions still.
I'm
Sorry about
I
that.
couldn't hear him, so he wasn't in the English.
Oh, Terry, can you jump on the English channel, please?
好，大家好，我是 Terry，或者你们的国语翻译哈，我是Roosevelt Languages 来的。今天呢，如果你们是用电脑上的话呢，你可以选择屏幕下方的一个地球仪的图标，然后再选择 Mandarin， 你就可以听到国语的频道了。如果你是用手机或者是平板电脑上来的话呢，你可以选择屏幕下方的3个点，然后再选择语言的选项，然后也可以听到 Mandarin， 也就是国语的频道。好，谢谢大家。然后 pass it to Anna. Cantonese,
Thank you,
please.
Terry. Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna. I'll be your Cantonese interpreter for the meeting tonight. 大家好，我係 Anna， 我係今天晚上嘅廣東話翻譯員。陣間見到個地球嘅時候，撳落去揀 Cantonese 廣東話，咁就有到廣東話嘅翻譯頻道噶啦。用咗3個點嘅話，咁點再揀更多，咁亦都去到廣東話翻譯頻道。唔該晒，陣間見。Thank you. Back to Ron.
Thank you, Anna. And just a reminder to all the interpreters to switch over to your other language channel and unmute yourself. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks to everybody for your patience. There's a lot going on here technically, so a lot of balls to juggle, but that's okay. We're caught up. So for those that were seeing kind of the weird images on the video, we fixed that as well. So for those at home, you should just be seeing the production like a normal city council or school committee. Some other housekeeping things. If all you could please silence your cell phones or turn them off, that would be great because it could be feedback in the room. And there'll be instructions about how to participate this evening, and that's coming up later. And for those that are online, if you begin to hear anything or see anything that is, low quality video or any of the issues, thank you for doing what you're doing and chatting that to us to let us know here in-house. With that, I would like to introduce Mayor Christensen to present some opening remarks.
Good evening. I'm Gary Christensen, Mayor of the City of Malden. Thank you for attending tonight's community meeting on Roosevelt Park. In a few minutes, our project team will provide a brief presentation on the project and go over some of the questions that we have received. Then we will open it up for questions and comments. Now, I know that this has generated a lot of conversation in our community. But what I hope won't get lost in that conversation is that we are all here tonight because we care about this park and because we want the very best for our city. I am grateful to all of you for participating in this process. Before we begin, I'm going to introduce Adam Weldi, who will be facilitating this meeting. As a school committee member, Adam is a terrific facilitator, and honestly, he's the only one that really understands all of this equipment. So without further ado, Adam Weldi.
Hey, everybody. We'll jump right in a minute or two. Thank you, Mayor Christensen. My name is Adam Weldi. I'm the Ward 5 School Committee member. I have the pleasure of being your friendly neighborhood facilitator tonight. Also, one of the only other people who knows the machine as well as Ron Cochran does, because this is what we do at our school committee meetings. So just a couple quick housekeeping items, particularly for those folks who are listening on Zoom as well. If you are in person and you would like to speak, please make sure that you sign in at the check-in table. There are some forms like this that are going around. You just want to make sure that your name is on here somewhere. When your name is called, step on up to the podium and speak into the microphone, but make sure you speak into the microphone so the folks on Zoom will be able to hear you as well. Please make sure to state your name and address for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. I'll do my best to keep time and keep it moving along. You can just give general comments, or you can ask questions. If you do ask a question, we'll turn it over to the panel who's standing behind me afterwards so that hopefully you'll get an answer to your question. We're going to try to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. So after signing up once, we're going to try to run through everyone who's here before allowing people a second time to come up. If you are joining us by Zoom, welcome. Please provide any questions, comments in the Q&A section. It's probably best, if possible, if you can actually type in your comments. They'll be read into the record, or type in your question. If you would like to be recognized, it's a little harder, but we can recognize you. Just put in the comments you'd like to be recognized via voice. For the folks at Zoom, people at home have also let us know in the past couple minutes to try to put on subtitles. It'll help not only the presentation, but you'll be able to hear what people are saying during their public comments. I think those are the big points. We'll try to make this as quick and easy as possible, while also making sure that everyone has a chance to speak and be heard. So, last note, just so everyone's aware, the meeting is being recorded by the City of Malden, by Urban Media Arts, and by resident Brian DeLacy. I don't know if we'll hit that, but if we reach capacity in this room, we will take a brief recess to set up the overflow room, where you'll be able to hear and see everything that's going on. But if you're signed up to speak, we would just ask that you come back in here and use this microphone to speak, so you don't have to do it from a side location. I believe that's it for me. So with that, I am going to go sit at the Zoom control, and I'm going to turn it over to Laura to introduce herself so you can hear from the panel, and then we'll go into the presentation and open up in the Q&A.
Good evening. My name is Laura Perez from the Malden Recreation Department.
Hello, everybody. Joe Levine from the Malden Recreation Department.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charlie Conifrey. I'm the Director of Athletics for Malden High School.
My name is Ron Cochran, the Communications Director. I'm assisting Adam tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Pratt. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Malden.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deborah Burke. I'm the Director of the Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development. My office is managing this park improvement program for the city.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm Steve O'Neill with Hayner Swanson. We are the design consultant and specifically responsible for the civil engineering components of the project.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meg Bazinski. I am a civil engineer with Activitas. We are your athletic field design consultant.
And hello, everyone. My name is Jay Peters, and I am a human health risk assessor with Haley and Aldrich.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Nangle. I'm the licensed site professional for the project.
Thank you, Adam. We're here tonight because the Malden community, including our families, the youth who attend our Malden public schools, and those who participate in the many valuable programs coordinated by Malden High School, Malden Recreation Department, and other organizations across the city, deserve a well-designed, well-equipped parks that serve the needs for both competitive sporting events, practices, and passive recreation. The plan to rehabilitate and renew Roosevelt Park will accomplish this goal and provide a place for our student athletes, Malden families to use every day, whether they're practicing or competing with their team, or just enjoying morning, afternoon, or an evening in a safe, inviting, and welcoming recreational space. Furthermore, the recreational space at Roosevelt Park will ease the use of the other numerous fields across the city that are already at maximum capacity. The students and families of Malden, including those who attend the Salemwood K-8 school, need and deserve Roosevelt Park Improvement Project and the benefits that it will provide. We have worked diligently to expand and increase our athletic offerings to students of all ages, genders, and cultures in the Malden Public Schools, and have strived to develop alliances, partnerships with the city youth programs like the Malden Recreation Department, Malden Pop Warner, Malden Youth Soccer, Little League, Babe Ruth, Youth Lacrosse, and several others. We can only achieve these things with the improvement plan we're presenting tonight. I know most of the debate of this project surrounds the use of turf versus grass. We chose turf for this project because it will provide us with a resilient surface that can withstand the use from all of our park users and ensure a quality, safe field for all. A grass field, even a new one, cannot sustain the amount of use that we see at the park, no matter the level of maintenance. In addition, this project will increase resiliency in the neighborhood by removing contaminated soil and increasing floodplain capacity. These changes will serve everyone in the community. We need a more safe, accessible, and multi-use park space to continue these relationships and move forward in providing opportunities to our youth to grow and improve physically, mentally, and emotionally. Through this consistent, active participation in physical education, recess, youth, middle, and high school athletics. Now I'll pass over to Deb.
I personally want to thank all of you for attending tonight's community meeting. It's probably has been about 2 years since we got together as a group to discuss this vast improvement program for Roosevelt Park. Those meetings that we held 2 years ago before the City Council, Community Preservation Committee, and and even one at the Salemwood School, I think produced a lot of really great positive feedback from the community that helped make us make some really important changes to the design. Some of the takeaways that occurred from those community discussions, we ended up adding 10 new trees to the park. We ended shrinking the amount of synthetic turf area. We also added basketball shooting areas, which was a request from the students at Salemwood School. So again, the community dialogue resulted in some great positive changes. So tonight we're here to get some more feedback and hear your concerns and take your questions. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Steve O'Neill and the design team to walk through the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. And again, welcome. I'm excited to be here. My first experience with Roosevelt Park was over 50 years ago as a 10-year-old playing in the Malden American Little League system. And then I had further experience with Roosevelt Park when I was the varsity soccer coach at Malden Catholic High School in the mid-1980s. So Roosevelt Park has a special place with me, and I think it's a facility that serves the city well. So I'm excited to be able to present the project again with my team members here, and we look forward to hearing again some more meaningful feedback from the community that can be considered as we move the project towards finalizing. So just by way of review and brief introduction, Roosevelt Park is situated on a 3.76 acre parcel. It's in a densely populated section of the city adjacent to the Salemwood School. The park is bounded by the Salemwood School to the east and the northeast, Salem Street to the north, Dell Street in the residential neighborhood to the west, and the Bike to the Sea to the south, and further to the south by commercial and industrial properties. The park was originally constructed in 1910, so for over 100 years, the park has served the city and its residents well. It has supported a host of activities over more than a century that have included civic gatherings, community events, informal, active, and passive recreation, city recreation programs, and today's ever-growing school youth, and adults sports programs. In the late 1990s, the city leaders decided to construct the Salemwood School on a portion of Roosevelt Park. The school construction was part of a robust school program that was implemented to address serious problems regarding the quantity and quality of classroom space available in the city. So for the past 20 years plus, Roosevelt Park has been shared with the Salemwood School in its 1,200 student population. The facility is used by the school during school days for school activities, before and after school, gym classes, recess, lunch, and other related activities. The park has suffered over the years from the use it sees. The challenges resulting from the park's low-lying location, its grading, drainage, and soil conditions, and the ever-shrinking municipal resources available to maintain the field in a well-kept condition. In recent years, sadly, the park has become increasingly underutilized due to its conditions. The city develops an open space and recreation plan every 7 years. The most recent plan was developed in 2017, and the plan really was the framework as we looked at the goals and objectives for the project. Among the goals articulated in the most recent open space plan were for the city to maximize the use of multi-use fields and to construct more multi-use fields, all aimed at targeting the increasing growth of the programs that the city wants to afford to its population. We think that we've developed a plan that responds to those needs and that is really focused on having a facility that's improved, that is equipped to better support broad and intense use. So with that introduction, I'm going to ask Meg Basinski, our sports field consultant, to walk you through the program that's being proposed under this project.
Great, thank you, Steve. So looking at the plan that we have today, as Steve pointed out, over to the right-hand side of the plan, you see the Salemwood School and the buildings associated with it. And then we have our main kind of playground to the north, some access drives, surrounding the field, and then the field itself. And what we're proposing, the existing conditions right now, there are 2 softball fields, Little League fields, right? And they sit in those 2 corners. We have a nice length of that field. We can fit in some rectangular space with a little extra room to spare. But width-wise, we're bound by the existing conditions of the site. So what we're proposing here, because the field doesn't have a lot of space to move around, the amount of use it has and the fact that it has existing athletic lights, this is a great location for synthetic turf. It's able to be used at all hours, right? Or not all hours, but through the hours that it's allowed. It is a durable surface. It can be used during rain. It can be used right after rain. And so from a surface perspective, it's going to meet those needs that Steve was just talking about. How can we increase, the availability of fields for use? How can we make sure that even though we're using these fields, a lot for the kids to play on, that we're able to keep it up and make sure that it's safe? And we've, as we looked at the information and as we looked at the numbers from the city, synthetic turf really starts to make a lot of sense at that site, and that's why we're proposing it. But what I think is really important is that in addition to the athletic surface, there is park area surrounding that, and it's really important to bring those pieces into the design. So just walking through, you can see, we have the pieces that fit into the athletic fields. We have the team bench areas associated with the softball and Little League areas. We have the sports lighting that's going to remain and actually be able to be used once again. We have a new basketball area that can, be used during recess as well as after school. That's number 4, where you can see it right up here at the top. We have actually installing basketball hoops near the synthetic turf field, and you wouldn't think that we'd normally have basketball hoops on synthetic turf. It's usually on some sort of asphalt, but there's this ability with the synthetic turf to allow kids to be down there. It's a great shoot-around area. So opening up those opportunities for other uses on the turf field increases the programmable, use of the site. Number 6, we'll talk about in a second, but we have an outdoor classroom, and it's towards the bottom of the page. There's a great space there now, and we're really looking to improve that space and actually improve the accessibility, making sure that that area is available to kids, with all needs, and making sure that that carry that through, the entire site, making sure that accessibility for all is available at this park. We're maintaining bike racks. We're bringing, obviously making sure maintenance and emergency vehicles can access. And then these areas surrounding the synthetic area, we're looking at new shade trees. You can see, let me just point it out. We have shade trees all along the north side in the lawn area. We are adding shade trees towards the south here, near the bike path. And then with the outdoor classroom, and I'll show you in a second, we're trying our best to maintain one of the existing shade trees as well as increasing the number in that area as well. So from a design perspective, we're meeting a lot of needs. We're meeting a lot of needs of the open space and recreation plan that the city has pulled together, as well as, needs for everyone. It's for everyone in Malden to be able to use and to enjoy and to really increase that recreational activity that's available. A little bit just about fencing. We want to have a balance of making sure that the site is relatively secure, but is still park-like, right? So we are using both fencing and netting to try and keep balls and things like that within the field of play, but without it, appearing overwhelming. So short fencing, taller netting that really blends into the landscape. And you can see whether we have the asterisks throughout the plan. Those are our access points. So a lot of different access points. We have openings in the fencing to make sure that when the Salemwood School is using the area, they can move in and out of the field very easily. We're not having to filter through, gates here and there. But it's a space that's going to be, it's going to have a lot of, it's going to be used very easily. And that's our goal, is to make sure that when the community is using it, they're able to move in and out. Now, these are just some examples that I thought I'd pull together of kind of urban communities with synthetic turf in here. And one I wanted to point out was in Worcester. This is the Boys and Girls Club in Worcester. It's in, a heavy industrial area. But the use of synthetic turf and then the surrounding areas with the lawn and then the trees, the shade trees, have actually been a real asset to the Boys and Girls Club for that use. So I see that use being very similar to this use. And the benefits of it is that in those late fall months, in those early spring months, we're really able to extend that use both for the community as well as the Salemwood School students, to be able to get out there, to be able to play soccer, to shoot around basketball hoop, all those great things. So thinking about this kind of as others have done it as well, and the benefits that those communities have seen, I think are really important. And then I just wanted to point out the outdoor classroom here. So as I mentioned, we are taking this area and we're going to improve on a great space that it is now. And so you can see we have obviously the access with the softball field or our team area, but then really trying to make this space behind it open, for the students at Salemwood. And we're proposing the raised planting tables, kind of mimic what's out there right now, but they're going to be, true ADA style tables to allow everyone to access that program. We have new shade trees. We have benches throughout, and making sure that regardless of the surface, we have asphalt with this painted mural on here. And I think that design, and there's going to be more discussion about that, how we want that to finally look. But there's also that soft space like you have now, that mulch gathering area. And we want to make sure that we're able to maintain those things, but still provide the accessibility for both. So with that, Steve, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Meg. I'm sorry. Thank you, Meg. I just want to touch on a few other highlights and very important considerations in the project. The first thing I'd like to do is just as a piggyback to Meg's overview of the project is to underscore some of the changes that Debbie Burke touched on earlier, that as we developed the design and we considered the public comment and the feedback that we got from municipal officials during the design process, we did incorporate some of those elements aimed at trying to be responsive to those concerns and considerations that we heard. And I think most notably is we did reduce the size of the synthetic turf surface by about 10% or about 12,000 square feet. That allowed us to, in turn, increase the amount of lawn area that we were able to provide around the perimeter of the field, and also gave us space to incorporate additional shade trees. Another key consideration is the fact that we the city actually has made a decision to use an alternative infill material. Traditionally, the synthetic fields use a crumb rubber infill, and there was concern expressed for both the potential adverse effect on both public health and the environment. So the city made a decision to forego the traditional crumb rubber and has committed to using this alternative infill. And the preferred infill is Brockville, which is a engineered wood fiber infill. It's fully organic. And one of the key benefits there is the infill. There's no question this surface will be warmer than a natural grass field. I don't want to suggest otherwise. But with the introduction of the Brockville, that will lessen the increase in surface temperatures that we'll experience with the synthetic turf field. And it could reduce the surface temperatures by anywhere from 20 to 50 degrees from what we would expect with a crumb rubber infill. So that, while it's a very tangible and significant benefit to the project. So I just think it's important to really underscore the fact that we are listening. I know that there are some that feel otherwise, and I respect that. But we are listening, and we're trying to balance all of the objectives for the project in order to deliver a project that will serve the wide range of needs for the community. So with that, just a couple of other things that I would like to touch on. We all know and we've heard that the field is located within a floodplain, and indeed it is. And as a result of that, we have to have special considerations in order to accommodate the functions and the purpose of the floodplain. And because of the floodplain, the project is subject to the jurisdiction of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act and the associated regulations. So floodplain, it's really an area that floods from a rise in a bordering waterway or water body. In the case of Roosevelt, it's likely due to an increase in the hydraulic grade line of the Saugus Branch Brook flood control conduit that runs along the south edge of the field within the limits of the former railroad right-of-way. So what happens is, in a bad event, the primary source of flooding would be that system becoming overloaded and exceeding its capacity, and the water in the pipes surcharge, essentially come out of the structures and top over into the field. So that's really the flooding in the context of flooding. Now, the field does suffer from poor surface grading, poor soil conditions that does not allow the surface water to get to the drain, so it stands, and we refer to that often as puddling or ponding on the field, which is different context from flooding by the strict sense of the term. So we've designed a system. Basically, what we have to do is we can't design a system that displaces flood storage. The critical things is that we protect flood storage so that it can do its purpose of holding the water that floods until such time as the flood subsides, and that water can either infiltrate or the drainage system can accept that water. So what we can't do is displace storage, because that would allow the flood waters to spread, and it runs the potential of increasing property damage if the flood spreads and gets onto, adjacent properties. So we've designed the system that will not result in that occurring. In fact, the system is designed will provide about a 7% increase in the flood storage that will be available at Roosevelt Park. Another important consideration when we're designing the drainage system in the context of the Wetland Protection Act is that we design the site's drainage system to assure that there will not be an increase in drainage leaving the site. So through the design of the drainage system, we've designed it such that there will be no increase in runoff or drainage flow from the site to the municipal drainage system. What that does is that protects against adverse downstream impacts that could be realized if we just let the stormwater that results from this project flow uncontrolled into the municipal drainage system. So with those considerations, we were required to file a notice of intent with the Malden Conservation Commission, which we did. The Malden Conservation Commission issued an order of conditions approving the project. The project that order of conditions was appealed by a group of residents, and we went through 2 levels of appeal with the Massachusetts DEP. The outcome of that appeal process was that Mass DEP dismissed the appeal, finding that we had satisfied and complied with the requirements of the Wetland Protection Act, and namely the prevention of flood storage and the protection against storm damage that would result. So we feel that we've adequately addressed the concerns related to those 2 issues. The other issue that has been really an item of concern is the soil conditions on the park. As part of our efforts to characterize the soil that's at the park, for purposes of determining what we have to do for proper disposal of that material, a program of explorations were done in order to determine what was there so that we can figure out what we need to do to legally dispose of that material. It was during those explorations that we found out basically that the site, there's a thin layer of topsoil that's underlain by what we refer to as urban fill. That's a heterogeneous mix of non-native material that can contain things like coal ash, glass, and other assorted things. It's evidence of the fact that the site had been historically filled, and the material that was imported is what was placed there. Now, it's not unusual from what we would expect to find in an urban site such as Malden. It's probably present throughout the city and all sorts of areas. But during that testing, we did find two isolated areas where the levels of lead in the top 12 inches of soil exceed the reportable conditions under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, which is the law basically that governs the release of hazardous materials and oils. So once that condition was encountered, it was immediately reported to DEP, and the area was fenced off. That's the area in the southeast corner that pretty much fences off the infield of that softball field. So the field was fenced off, signage was posted notifying the public of what was there, and we went forward. So in doing that, we have essentially achieved a temporary solution. So that temporary solution basically restricts access to that area, and it cuts off an exposure pathway for members of the public who could be exposed to the soil conditions that are in that area. Now, because of this condition, the project is subject to the Mass Contingency Plan, and the city, with Jeff Nangle, our project LSP's assistance, they will navigate the process so that that material is properly handled and is remediated as part of the project that's being proposed. And once we've gotten through the project and we've dealt with that, and that will essentially consist of removing that material that had the high concentrations of lead, we will receive, that will achieve a permanent solution for that area where we've identified it, we've addressed it, and we've eliminated the potential for adverse impact on human health. Another thing that I want to point out is the soil conditions that are at the site are really considered a background condition, and they are exempt under the terms of the MCP. Notwithstanding, because of the nature of the site, the active athletic use, the proximity to the school, we felt, and with the guidance of Jeff Nangle, the LSP, that it's wise to address that, even though by the regulations it's unnecessary, by providing an improved direct contact barrier. And what that means essentially is we're going to remove a sufficient depth of soil. Under the field, it will be 15 inches. We will put a geosynthetic fabric, and then we will build back up with clean material and the synthetic turf system. So that will provide us with an improved direct contact barrier that will ensure the safety and it eliminates the risk potential risk associated with the soil conditions that exist on the site. So that, I think, are the key points that I think are important to discuss a little bit for people who may not have heard it before. And like I say, you know, I think we've designed a project that really will achieve the city's goals and objectives for Roosevelt Park. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Alex Pratt, who will talk to the environmental review that was performed for the field.
So I'm sorry, just prior to going to Alex, just for those at home that are looking to ask questions, we are monitoring all the questions that are coming in, but my suggestion is that you combine your questions into one, because what I'm seeing is multiple questions come in and various comments, and what's going to wind up happening, it's going to go to the bottom of the queue. So for your questions, I suggest that you wait till the conclusion of all presentations and then stack your question together as one big question. Then we'll read it into the record. And also, to those at home and those in the audience, when you do come up to ask a question, if you could please state your name and your address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Steve, for that presentation. I want to walk through what we call the environmental review, which is something that we are required to complete when we use funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It is very dense, complicated information. I am going to be trying to be as clear and plain language as possible, and please forgive me if I do not fully succeed in that, but I will endeavor to be simple. So the environmental review, it's required, it's required for use of HUD funding. The City of Malden is using $1.2 million in HUD funding. Specifically, it's a program called the Section 108 program, which has to do with the city's Community Development Block Grant program. I don't want to get deep into the weeds on that tonight, but if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk more about it. And so because we are using those funds, before we begin the project, we need to complete our environmental review. And the federal environmental review combines dozens of separate requirements into one assessment. So there might be a federal law, there might be a federal regulation, there might be 6 or 7 environmental justice related executive orders that we need to consider and document as part of our project. And so that is all combined into our environmental review. Very important about the environmental review, this is the federal government asking us to document certain types of information that they are asking us. We are doing and we do more than what is asked for in the environmental review, but we don't typically add information to that unless they specifically ask for it. For example, we've added shade trees, as was discussed. HUD does not ever ask us about shade trees, so we have not previously included it. What do they ask for? They ask for 15 categories of requirements, and I'm not going to talk about each one in detail, but just quickly to give you a sense, each one of these categories comes from a federal regulation that requires that when we use any type of federal money, we have to document compliance with this. The one I put up on the screen here is airport hazards. Building a park in any type of way is not ever going to be a hazard to an airport. We documented compliance because we are further than 2,500 feet from Logan Airport, which is the closest airport. And so essentially what I do to show HUD that I'm complying with that question is I upload a map. I say, here's Malden, here's the airport, we're not right next to it. And they say, okay, great, you're set. So there are 15 categories that we have to do that for. They're listed up here. I'll just point out a few. Coastal barrier resources, this is not a coastal project. Farmlands protection, we do not have any farmland in Malden. These types of categories are very simple, where we just say, yes, this does not apply to us, yes, we comply, no further actions are needed. There are 2 categories that do require formal mitigation, which we were planning on addressing anyway. And those categories are soil contamination, which I know Steve discussed, and as a part of the project, we are removing contaminated soil and then capping it compliant with state and federal regulations. And then the floodplain management, which Steve also spoke about. And as part of this project, we are actually, rather than, essentially they are asking here to make sure we're not displacing the floodplain as Steve described. And what we are in fact doing is increasing the floodplain capacity. So what we do in this process is we say, in these screens that you saw back here, I have one of those for soil contamination, one of those for floodplain. And what we do is we just describe how we are going to comply with that. So we will say, during the project, we are remediating the soil contamination, and we are remediating the floodplain, we are managing the floodplain appropriately, and here is how we will do that in technical terms. We upload that, we get approved, and then during the process of actually constructing the project, we will then show proof that we have done so. So it remains a living and breathing document and is updated through the life of the project. Once we have done that, we have addressed all of the 15 compliance factors, and we have addressed the 2 topics that required formal mitigation, which are these 2 here, the soil contamination and the floodplain issues. And if we are able to fully mitigate and comply, we generate what is called a finding of no significant impact. This is the term that the feds use. This is what the regulations require. Again, this is a regulatory exercise. We do go above and beyond that, but that is just how this environmental review process works. So we complete those 15 categories. We show that we are complying, and then we consider the environmental justice needs. Now, the environmental justice category in the environmental review only requires cities to respond when there is a finding of significant impact, and we have not identified a finding of significant impact. That being said, we are going above and beyond and making sure that we are communicating with communities of color, with environmental justice communities, and considering other things that were not included in that regulatory review. Again, because there are topics that are not being regulated by the federal government, doesn't mean we're not thinking about those topics and making sure that we're addressing them fairly. So once we did all this, we submitted our environmental review to HUD. It included several hundred pages of documents, including supporting materials on a number of topics, including different public comments we've received in the past. We sent that into HUD. Unsurprisingly, HUD came back and asked us to add a little bit more information. Now they are asking us to talk about a couple topics that were not previously covered in the environmental review, and they're asking us to submit documents that they had not previously asked us for. So we are going to be doing those things. One of those is on community outreach. There is no portion of the form that we fill out for the environmental review where they ask us about community outreach, but we have done substantial community outreach on this project, including in 2019, which is when we started having community meetings, although I believe there were some in prior years, but for this most recent phase of the project, we had initial community meetings in May of 2019. We had a design unveiling that incorporated community feedback and resident feedback in November of 2019. And there have been other subsequent public meetings as well, including with the Community Preservation Committee, the City Council, and then in 2020, it might have been in 2021, excuse me, the COVID years all blend together. We had a Section 108 loan process, which is where we applied for funding from HUD for this project, and we had a process there. We had a couple of public meetings and a lot of back and forth with public comments on that process as well. So what we will be doing is we will be updating the environmental review to show all of that information, to show HUD that we have done those things. We will also be including materials that we use to share this meeting and to add this meeting to the documentation for HUD to review. One topic HUD recently asked us to address, which HUD does not regulate formally, but they asked us to include anyway, and we are very happy to do that, is heat island. Now, heat island or urban heat island is a phenomenon in which the built environment, so that's buildings, roads, trees, etc., affects the temperature of the surroundings. So when we look at heat island, it's typically caused by dark impervious surfaces. So that's going to be your roadways, your parking lots, industrial buildings, particularly industrial buildings with flat black rooftops, also generate a lot of heat, and it has to do with without getting too into it, it has to do with how reflective the surface is. So if it's a white top roof, it's going to generate far less heat than a black top roof. If all of our pavement was white for whatever reason, it would generate less heat. So those are the things that we look at and think about with heat island at a very big picture. Other things such as trees will help mitigate heat island. What you see here is a map of heat island in Greater Boston. It is not a pretty map. It shows that in most of our dense urban areas, we experience high levels of heat island. And that affects most cities here that you see. And the only cities that get some relief from this are cities that are less densely populated, more single-family homes. So if you look at Newton, Brookline, and Braintree, they have less heat island. And as you get further away from the city, you experience that less as well. So here's a zoomed-in picture of what this looks like in Malden, Melrose, and Medford. Again, you can see that heat island is affecting the city pretty much across the board, with the exception of that area by the Fells, between Melrose, Malden, and Medford. The Fells is a huge plot of land that has a lot of trees, a lot of green areas, and several ponds and lakes. So because of that, the temperatures are lower. But you see, even around Fellsmere Ponds, which you can see in the bottom corner here, let me see if I can make it a little clearer. In this area here, the only area that's really given any relief from heat island from the pond being there is right over the pond itself. There's not a lot of relief. And that is because heat island is more than just a parcel by parcel issue. It is larger than that. It is groups of blocks of the city. It is full areas of the city. The only other area in the city where there is some type of relief is the cemetery in the bottom right-hand corner here, or the southeastern side of the city, where it is just a huge swath of land. And so because of that, you start to get some relief. Otherwise, you're just seeing a lot of heat all around. Now, that is very dreary, but we do have solutions, and we are implementing them, and we are working on escalating those solutions. So again, it is a citywide problem. Frankly, it's a regional problem and a global problem, but it's an issue that we are tackling citywide. That includes increasing the number of street trees, including through the Greening the Gateway Cities grant program, which the city was awarded. We're planting trees throughout the city, especially focusing in areas that are most affected by heat island. We are considering lighter color surfaces for our playground surfacing. So when we design a new playground, we will often put a new surface in, and we want to make sure that that area is light and reflective so that the sunlight is not captured in the surface of the playground. We're looking at that specifically in playgrounds, but also in other areas as well. For example, we're looking at a basketball court, and when we paint the basketball court, are there lighter colors that we can paint it so that it is more reflective? Those are the types of conversations that we have. Additionally, the city has a program where we help low and moderate income people rehab their homes and fix code corrections. A part of this, we very frequently see buildings that have roofs coming down or roofs that are deteriorating. And when we rebuild those roofs, one of the things that we've started to do recently is we are really encouraging people to use lighter colored shingles, because the dark tile shingle is going to produce far more heat than a white or light color shingle or other types of roofing surfaces. So those are all things that we are doing now to address heat island citywide and taking a citywide approach to that challenge. In addition, the city recently was awarded grant funds to do a climate action plan, which we've been hoping for a long time. So because we have those funds, in the next month or so, you'll be hearing more from the city in terms of how that plan will be unveiled and how we'll engage the community as a part of the decision-making process as a community for how we address climate change, including heat island. So although we are already doing these things, the climate action plan will surely touch on heat island again and tell us more of what we can do and how we can double down and make sure that we are addressing heat island as best as possible. At Roosevelt specifically, we are addressing heat island in a number of ways that Steve already mentioned, but I'll just say them again briefly. We're adding shade trees. We are adding the wood fiber infill, and because it is wood, as Steve said, that will lower the temperature versus a traditional artificial turf field by 20 to 50 degrees. And then one thing that we really look at heat island, where heat island is the most challenging and concerning, is when it's a residence. So if you have an apartment building with a blacktop rooftop or a house, that heats the resident and heats the residents and makes people who live there less safe in summers. And when we see extreme heat events and health concerns because of extreme heat events, it's typically a residence. Fortunately, Roosevelt Park is not a residence, so if there are unsafe levels of heat, especially as climate change gets worse in the years to come, it's the same as what would happen with every other park in the city. You would just not be on that field. And because it's not someone's residence, no one is required to be in that field, and they can go and seek cooler environs elsewhere. I wanted to touch briefly on artificial turf. So one of the questions that HUD asked us to discuss in more detail was why we chose artificial turf. I know Steve and Charlie already spoke on artificial turf, so I won't go into detail. But essentially, artificial turf was chosen to meet the recreational needs of the city, and because a grass field cannot sustain the level of use that we see at this field and that we need at this field and across the city, and so that is why artificial turf was chosen. We have addressed floodplain issues when we implement that turf by increasing floodplain capacity, which will also help. With a grass field, the floodplain just was not, I should say, with the floodplain, the grass field was not sustainable, and it was just no amount of maintenance would allow for that grass field to meet the city's recreational needs. And then by using the wood fiber infill, we are helping to mitigate that urban heat island that we discussed. Another topic I wanted to discuss and that we'll be uploading into our environmental review is a racial equity analysis. So when we think about racial equity, we think about who is impacted by these actions or lack of actions. Who are the neighbors who are affected? Who are the user groups? Are there different groups of people who are traditionally underrepresented or historically oppressed groups of people that we need to take special care to make sure that we are not harming these groups of people? So I'm going to talk about what those groups look like. At the Salemwood School and Malden public schools generally are very diverse. Malden is an exceptionally diverse city, one of the Commonwealth's most diverse cities in terms of racial equity and in terms of ethnicity. This is what that looks like on a map. It's a little hard to see here. We have a full blown up map, and you can check it out on the city's website. If you go to cityofmalden.org/OSPCD, you'll see a drop-down link for plans, reports, and maps, and you can see the map here. What this map shows is it shows every resident in Malden. Each dot here represents one Malden resident. And following the lead of the University of Virginia, which used these maps to explore redlining and how different groups of people live in different areas, it has to do a lot with housing, and has to do a lot with the environment, and we thought this was a really helpful way to think about Malden's population and where it lives in the city. So we generated this map when we got the census data last year. We shared it with the council. We love talking about it and referring to it, and we're using it again here because what we can see is that although the city is diverse throughout the city, there are areas where there are more groups of people of color. And so if you look at, if you're familiar with the northern part of the city, Ward 3, Ward 5, Ward 6, and to some extent Ward 7 tend to be more suburban and tend to have fewer people of color, and then the rest of the city has more people of color. And that is, again, relative to the city. Our city is a very diverse city. This is just relative to one another. So to show you a better image of that, a more granular view, this is Ward 5. So the Salemwood School is right around here, and the park is right here. So you can see that there are a lot of people of color who live in the neighborhood immediately to the west of the park. And then if you go north of Salem Street, it tends to look more like what Malden looks like overall. Ward 6, so again, Roosevelt Park is right here. There are not a lot of residences to the, immediately to the south of the park. In fact, there are none immediately to the south of the park. That's because that's an industrial area. And so when we think about urban heat island or we think about flooding, it doesn't really affect those people in the same way. But it is something that we look about. And then when we look at Ward 6 is less diverse than the city overall, but it's so close, it's pretty on the margin. But we want to keep that in mind as well. And then I just saw the Ward 7 counselor walk in, so I'm sure he'll appreciate seeing his ward up here on the map. This is, again, just showing the diversity in Ward 7, and we have a lot of people of color in Ward 7. It's the most diverse ward, and that's represented here. So that is how we do our racial equity analysis, and we look and see who benefits from the new park, what are the issues that we need to keep in mind, and those are all things that we will be incorporating into the environmental review when we send it up to HUD. So our next steps on the environmental review are to be uploading and including this additional information, submitting it to HUD, and then as I mentioned, it's a living, breathing document. There are going to continue to be updates to the environmental review throughout the process until the project is complete. And we are looking forward to remediating the floodplain, we are looking forward to remediating the soil conditions and eliminating some contamination, as well as addressing the floodplain management and increasing floodplain capacity as part of that project. And that's my presentation. Back to Adam.
All right. Let's turn it over to you. So at this point, we're going to do our best to alternate between in-person attendees and Zoom attendees, between everyone who has signed up already on the sheet and folks who are in the queue on Zoom. We've got about 45 minutes or so worth of speakers. So I'm going to ask just when you're called, come on up. Please make sure to state your name and address for the record, and I'll do my best to time and keep you to 2 minutes. So our first up in person, Helen Webb. Let me turn on your mic, Helen.
Hi, I'm Helen Webb. I live at 55 Bloomerth. I've been there for about 24 years. I just want to say I'm very, very excited about this project. I'm deeply involved in soccer in Malden, and also my daughter played basketball. And, you know, we are just so hard up for decent places to play sports that this just seems like something that kids from all over the city will really benefit from. So thank you very much.
All right, our next in-person attendee, Chris Murphy.
Good evening. I'm Chris Murphy, 55 Blommer Street. I'm the father of 2 young women who have been born and raised in Malden, be able to take advantage of a lot of the programs Malden offers, up through, you know, from little sports to up through varsity sports on Malden High. I'm also a former volunteer in Malden Youth Soccer, where I've served on the board of directors and several years as a coach. And so I've had an intimate amount of experience with the space issues in Malden. So I'm really, would like to thank the city for trying to address those needs and make more safe, accessible spaces available to our youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next up in person is Chi-Sing Lee.
Hello, my name is Chi-Sing Lee. I live in 20 Holden Street. So my husband and I moved to Malden 7 years ago, and we adopted 2 kids. They both are Latino descent. The reason we chose Malden is because it is one of the most diverse cities, and we want to make sure that it addressed the need of my kid. So my kid loved to play soccer. So I asked him, you know, he has played in the grass field or turf field. I said, which one do you like? He said, turf field. I said, isn't it harder? He said, yes, but it's fine with me. And he said that they drink water, they take breaks, and it's going to work well with him. So I am supporting this renovation project on behalf of my son. Thank you.
All right. Next up, oh, good idea. Next up in person, the Right Honorable Neil Anderson. Come on up, Counselor.
Well, good evening, Mr. Moderator and the panel, and Mayor Christensen, and all of us that are here this evening to talk about this great jewel that we have here at Roosevelt Park. My name is Neil Anderson. I live at 56 Mill Street in Malden. I'm the former Ward 7 City Councilor, and probably more importantly than that is that for the first 18 years of my life, I lived within probably 50 yards of Roosevelt Park. My family lived on Plaisted Road, so from my birth to graduating high school, Roosevelt Park was my home park, was the place that I went and played baseball and skated in the park, and back in those days when we even had little park instructors and all sorts of activities going on there. This was our neighborhood place to go. For those of us who grew up poor in this city and didn't have vacation homes to go to. It was the parks that we went to. This park is near and dear to me. So when Steve O'Neill tells us that he's been connected with the park for 50 years, I will tell you that I go back 76 years, Steve, so I think I have that on you. So I'm here this evening to speak in strong support of this project. When Councilor Murphy, first told me about her plans for putting this together, I was really, really excited about it, and excited about it because I know that this park has had so much great use, but the problem has always been, and I think you've pointed it out this evening, that too often throughout the year the park was always soggy and didn't have good drainage, and when it rained there was a limited use to the park. I have to stop, huh?
I was weighing whether or not I was going to give you that, and then I was like, but you could go for 5 to 10 more minutes, so I don't...
Well, I mentioned that I'm a former city councilor, so I'm a politician. So I get here in front of a microphone, and I have a difficult time staying to 2 minutes. But I will just wrap it up by saying I'm a strong supporter of this. I think it needs to be turf, because the one major comment I would make is that as the councilor in Ward 7, the parks that we have in Ward 7, the most racially diverse neighborhood, the parks can't handle the soccer requests that we have. So that at Miller Park or Lincoln Common, we've had to stop soccer there because it kills the field. And that's what would happen at Roosevelt Park, so I will leave it at that. Put in turf here at Roosevelt Park.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, next up, and before we rotate to Zoom, one more in person, Doug Danoff.
I didn't know about the 2-minute limit, so you'll have to cut me off. Hi, I'm Doug Danoff from 120 Glen Street. I currently serve in my 3rd term as president of Malden Youth Soccer. I won't read this whole thing, but a couple things. City programs like ours depend on fields like this. Just soccer alone, we're gonna have 600 kids playing this fall on 56 teams. We're really squeezed on what we have right now. Many of our kids come from very low income households. And although our cost is low for everybody, families with limited means pay nothing to play with us. If we don't have access to fields, we can't survive, and we are really squeezed on them. So the disadvantaged kids will suffer the most, because the kids with means can go to expensive clubs, exclusive clubs, and play, however much they want. Kids that we serve are not those kids. So we need to have some place to put them. And Malden is full of opportunities to help kids like that, and that's what we do. It's really baffling to me how much the opponents are, willing to sacrifice sports. It's clear, based on the conditions of this field, that it's either going to be grass or it's going to be sports. It's a sad relationship, but that is essentially how I interpret the situation. In the fall, with our 600 kids, we're going to have thousands of relationships budding, and many of them are going to bloom and seed. And kids find extreme meaning and purpose through playing sports, and this passion leads them to learn how to succeed in all other things. So I think to sacrifice sports, to be so willing to sacrifice sports, doesn't seem like the right solution for us.
About 10 seconds.
Okay, so, I just want to make sure that I'm not used to speaking like this, but as strongly as I can, this field needs to get done. If it doesn't get done, an important part of our community collapses, and we can't let that happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this point, we're going to turn it over to Ron to take a question from someone or comment from someone on Zoom.
Okay, our first question is from Aline Lalis. Apologies in advance for any pronunciation errors. Can a dog park be included in the design? Lots of residents play with their dogs in this park. Thank you.
Who from the panel would love to take that one?
Some of the questions we anticipated that we may not be able to answer this evening, that is one, because we'll have to, well, you know, it's a good suggestion and it's a great question, but it's something that we're going to have a convo with the designs team, because we only have so much space in terms of laying out field space and then the other wishes from the community. But I can promise that we'll look into it, and we're going to, as Alex said, keep that document, a live document, on the city's website. So there'll be updates posted to that regularly.
Okay, our next question is from Jim Stolecki. Jim asks, can the objectives of the project to provide recreation, remediate contaminated soil, and enhance flood storage be accomplished as well or better by a natural grass facility?
I think that the challenge that would preclude that is the hours of use that the city desires to put on Roosevelt Park. With a natural grass field, if we wanted to maintain that field in good condition, if we wanted to compare apples to apples, a synthetic turf field in good condition versus a natural grass field in good condition, the hours of use that would be permitted on a natural grass field would be far fewer, probably 2.5 times fewer hours that could be used. And that would not be able to support the desire of what wants to be on that field. So what would happen if we went to a natural grass field, the hours of use would have to be limited, and that would adversely impact everyone. And there would be difficult decisions. Does that mean that Malden Youth Soccer can't use the field? Does it mean that the Salemwood School can't use the field? And those types of decisions really would be unfair to the broad spectrum of users that want to and deserve to be on that field. So that's the challenge with the natural grass surface. So I would say, in answer to that question, that no, I don't think that a natural grass field could support all of those three goals of use, floodplain, and cleanup.
Okay, our next question, there's two in a row, so I'll combine them. It's from D. Welke, I believe. The first is, this is inconsistent, and what he was referring to was when you were talking about the type of infill. He said this is inconsistent to Brock USA claims lower temp, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, with crumb rubber, 40 degrees if watered. Adding water and heat increases humidity and risk of heat stroke. So that's the first part. And then the second part is, the concern is drainage system will not capture all of the microplastic blades. And he puts in 551 to 661 pounds per year, 80,000 square foot field. It will capture 0 PFAS and other toxic chemicals that leach from the field.
Do I have the courage to ask you to kindly repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So first part was essentially about that the fill, basically what he's saying is that adding to reduce the temperature as indicated would require adding water, which he claims would increase humidity and then risk of heat stroke. And then the second question is about the drainage system not being able to capture the microplastic blades and concerns for PFAS and other toxic chemicals leaching from the field.
I'm sorry, those are good questions. In regards to the first one, Brockville is an engineered wood fiber. And that means it's referred to what we call as hydrophilic. So it will absorb and hold water. So through the natural course of it being there. With rainfall, it will occur. It will absorb water, and it will, by its nature, condense and give some added cooling effect. So that is on top of the cooling effect that would be offered just by the fill itself being lighter in color, being wood compared to the crumb rubber. So that's why the range of potential reduction in temperature related to the Brockville. In regards to the second question with microplastics, the turf field, yes, it's plastic fibers, and those fibers will, over time, they will degrade, and they will break down. And yes, there will be loose turf fiber. What happens is with proper maintenance of the field, by regularly grooming the field, making sure the infill is at the appropriate levels, that will deter the premature degradation and breakdown of the fiber. So that's an essential component. The maintenance has to be considered in this. And also with the routine maintenance, you groom it. They use a tool, what we refer to as a litter cat, and it basically drags behind a utility vehicle and it picks up stuff. It picks up chewing gum, Band-Aids, bottle caps, loose fiber. So the routine maintenance practices will help to safeguard against the plastic fibers getting into the stormwater stream, if you will. Another element that we've added to the project, as we listened and we considered, along the south end of the field, which is the low end that is immediately adjacent to the drainage basin that is there, we've introduced a raised curb along that whole edge of the field. So that raised curb will help to contain debris, not just microplastics and loose fiber, but other debris that is inevitably going to find its way onto the field. So that will contain that type of material from migrating off of the field and into the adjacent drainage basin and then downstream eventually to the Malden River. And with regard to PFAS, I'm going to turn that over to Jay Peters and ask him to kindly speak to that.
Sure, no problem. There have been tests on synthetic turf systems, recent tests, in fact, in systems in New England that have specifically looked at that question of whether synthetic turf can release PFAS chemicals. And what those tests have shown is that, generally speaking, PFAS chemicals are just not detectable in the turf systems. And in cases where they are detectable, they are at concentrations much lower than standards that, like the state of Massachusetts has set, that would be protective for PFAS in soil to contact or to leach it to groundwater. In fact, the concentrations that have been detected in turf are lower than actually what occurs in soil just as a anthropogenic condition. That answers it.
Okay, our next question is from Keith Bernard. I have a concern about the 15 inches versus 48 inches removal of the contaminated soil. If the toxins are water soluble, what is being done to make sure that those substances are being remediated properly for anyone downstream of the park?
I'd like to ask Jeff Nangle, Teams LSP, to respond to that.
There's a couple of different points that need to be considered. Removal of 15 inches to accommodate the project allows us to put in a direct contact barrier, the field, that will be protective of risk. And the incremental increase, or if you were to go down to 48 inches, for example, as the gentleman said, you are going to get no incremental benefit in risk, and you're going to incur a lot more cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars, for really no benefit in comparison to the turf field. What was the other part of the question?
And if the toxins are water soluble, what is being done to make sure that those substances are being remediated properly for anyone downstream of the park?
Yeah, we did 91 geoprobes and handheld probes in 2019, analyzed them for a whole suite of metals that we need, metals, PAHs, things that we needed to analyze for so we could dispose of it off-site. The levels that are there are not water, soluble, or if you will, going to leach into groundwater. We don't see any indications of that whatsoever, and so that's not a concern.
Okay, our last until we switch back to you, Adam, is a comment, and I'm just trying to find it, and it's from Tracy Luther. Tracy says, "You're making a significant impact on our children in the neighborhood and at the school." And back to you.
Thank you, Ron. All right, we're going to toggle back to in person. Just a reminder, name and address for the record. And our first is Karen Cologne-Hayes.
You can hear me this way, right? I just wanted to address the people in Malden. First of all, Karen Cologne-Hayes, I'm your city councilor at large, but I've been outspoken about this project since, I think, like when it first started. So this is not political for me, it's very personal. I want to thank everyone for coming here tonight. If anyone who knows me knows I love civic engagement. It's fantastic. It's the only way change happens. So thank everybody here for coming. But a few things, and I could probably go on all night, but I don't want to take it from Councilor Anderson to address all those other comments that were up there, but a few things. So I am a big sports fan. Our family is a big sports fan. We played softball here. I'm a softball player. My husband plays soccer. He still plays soccer. He coached soccer. I coach softball. So I'm not a sports hater. I love sports. So it has nothing to do with that. It really has a lot to do with the community in Salemwood. So I know when this project first came, because I was working for the city then, that they were not involved in the process, right? So we came, and I was sitting there with a few people here in the cafeteria, and I remember the plans being shown, and that was the first time that the community was being involved, and they were given plans. So I want everybody here who I've seen speak at city council meetings to think about if someone was coming into your ward or your backyard and said, this is what we're going to do in your area, and you have no say over it, how mad would you be? I'm really frustrated when I hear people attacking the Friends of Roosevelt Park, because all they're trying to do is protect themselves from toxic waste that is in their schools. And I think that when Alex Pratt was presenting some of the data, I did see the demographics, but you left off, unless I missed it, the school demographics. Salemwood School is the most diverse city, the most diverse school, students who are walking in to their school, seeing a fenced-off area of toxic, lead-filled soil for over 2 years. So if I had my kid going there, I don't know what I would, it's just frustrating. It is the truth. It is the truth. So let's just all come together, because I know that everyone here came in here saying that, I'm sure everybody came in here with good intentions for our city.
About 10
I
seconds.
know that's what came in here. And so if we can just come together about at least cleaning up those toxins, I think that we're here for the kids. We're Malden. We're not here against each other, sports against, like, I don't even know what, people who care about the environment, but we're all Malden. So please, let us at least start at cleaning up the toxic waste that's in Roosevelt Park, please. Thank you.
All right. Our next in-person speaker is Kim Sterrett.
Hi, Hannah. Hi, Joe. Kim Sterrett, 73 Bowman Street. I'm a homeowner. I worked at the Salemwood School for 5 years, from 2009 to 2014. Thank you. As a substitute school nurse, I worked for Kathy and Patty when they were out. So I'm very familiar with the school, and as a teenager, I attended rock concerts there. My children more recently played sports there. My daughter recently played softball there, so it's very upsetting to hear about the lead. And I know you have good intentions, and it really needs a cleanup. It's always been a very sad, neglected park. My dad used to play there. In fact, my dad's best friend was Ronnie Anderson, who was Neil Anderson's cousin from Plaisted Road. And so I'm very familiar with the park and all that. But I think that you're missing the complexity of it. It's a very complex issue. And as Karen said, it's really not, sports against grass or, whatever. And I wanted to ask, when you throw out the word organic, it's a nice buzzword, but what do you mean by organic? Because organic just really means that it contains carbon.
It's an engineered wood particle. It's 100% southern pine. The pine is grown and harvested and then mechanically processed to produce the infill.
Okay. Yeah, I went on the Brock website, and I think that Brock USA says that the Brock fill goes to 121 degrees versus the crumb rubber, which is 154 degrees. So 121 is still pretty hot. I mean, you got to admit, that's really hot. Not good for the environment or the kids. I think that's my opinion, but anyway, so, thank you.
Okay, next up in person, 1, 2, 3, Ryan O'Malley. Oh, there he is.
Hello, everyone. Ryan O'Malley, Ward 4 City Councilor. Historically, Roosevelt Park was a fire pond that the fire department used where they would dump old burnt materials. So if a house burnt down, they would pick it up and they would throw it into this pond. The city knew that because the city was doing it. It was for over a century. So we heard that the park was built in 1910. So for over a century, kids have been playing in lead-contaminated soil. That's concerning to me. As a former student of the Salemwood School, when it opened, I actually went with Danny Gillis, who was in the audience, or is in the audience, and Adam Weldai. I played in that dirt. I was exposed likely to lead-contaminated soil, the same way your children probably have been exposed to lead-contaminated soil in that field for 110 years. That's crazy. They were clearly aware of it. It should have been stopped a long time ago. We have members of the administration, including Mayor Christensen, who served on the school committee back when the Salemwood School was opened. For 20 plus years now, the city has known that there was lead-contaminated soil, and they continued to let kids play. And it wasn't until the softball players kept sliding and digging up more and more contamination and exposed themselves to more and more lead that the city was like, you know what, maybe we should fence this off because of the liability. I think it's unacceptable. They're proposing removing only 15 inches of contaminated soil. In order to make this safe, you can pay anyone to say anything. In order to make this safe, you need to remove 3 feet of soil. That's all I'm asking. Remove 3 feet, put turf down, great. I don't like it, but I would be okay with it. 3 feet makes it safe. 3 feet is all that we should be accepting. Thank you.
All right. Our next up in person, Neil Kinnan. And I'm going to remind folks, maybe if they speak and play around with the microphone, to just try to put it back on the podium so that the folks on Zoom can hear you too.
Good evening, Neil Kinnan, 11 Spruce Street, former Ward 6 councilor. And I will just, I'll start this way. Somebody said it was a complex issue. I think it was a constituent of mine, in fact, who just was up here. It's absolutely true. But here's what I would say, and hopefully I can get through this, is that it's all about balance in the city. And we do live in a heat island, and what I was happy to hear stated tonight is the biggest problem is non-single family houses. So if we would just stop building, we wouldn't have as big of a problem. Every apartment place you put up is worse than a turf field. That's a fact, a fact. So remember that the next time it comes up. The next thing I'd like to do is just read and remember balance. Linden, Trafton, Kearsted, High Rock, Forestdale, Waits Mountain, Ferryway, Bell Rock, Deva, Callahan, Fellsmere, Pine Banks, the Riverwalk to come, and congratulations to the mayor and Councilor Linehan. Hopefully Malden Hospital with much green space remaining and not an apartment building up there. Thank you. That's 13 or 14 places that people can go for passive, and far more space than Howard, Maplewood, a little part of Pine Banks, McDonald Stadium, and Roosevelt when you hopefully turf it over. It's been a long time coming, but the people, as the gentleman who I don't know at soccer back here, he's right. We need places for soccer, for lacrosse, for softball, for baseball, and all of these things. And there's balance here. There's much more space, much more green space the other way. About 10 seconds. And that's what I'd like to say. And so those who think I'm all about turf, I just want to remind them of one thing. In 2011, there was a plan called the largest recreation plan that ever happened in this city, $12.5 million. In that plan was a plan to turf McDonald Stadium, turf South Broadway Park, which was a disaster for years. Couldn't play on it every day it rains. It rains 130 days, or precipitation 130 days in Boston.
Councilor Kinnan, I'm going to cut you off.
And
okay?
so in that plan was also, for people to remember, who may think, oh, he's just all about turf, was the plan to fix Waits Mountain and to purchase High Rock, which is the largest set-aside in the last 100 years in this city.
Councilor, I don't mean to be rude, but I've got to keep to it. As of right now, I'd say our elected officials are the ones who are having a hard time adhering to the time limits. We've got one more in person, and it's Stephanie Alberto. Oh, Stephanie, let me turn on the thing. There you go.
Hi, Stephanie Alberto, 409 Bryant Street. I made this poster. The issues of racism didn't start in 2022. This is a redlined map that shows that south of basically Salem, you have all of these redline districts. And if you look today, those districts have giant heat islands. This is not anybody sitting here's fault, but it is our responsibility. This is racism. These are the effects of racism. The neighbors in these areas don't get to come here to the park, spend 2 hours, and go home to a nice, cool neighborhood. They're here. If you have everybody in this neighborhood running their air conditioner in a heat wave, which we know is going to be more and more and more, blackouts could happen. People are vulnerable. People who have health conditions or obesity or elderly, people are going to get hurt. And it is our responsibility to take care of this even if we didn't cause this problem. There are already 4 artificial turf fields in this heat island. And instead of thinking about how we could fix this problem, we're just turning a blind eye and saying, oh, well, not our problem, let's turf another one in this neighborhood. Laura, I believe, is coming up later, and she's gonna give you more numbers. But if you take all of the parks in 5-1, 7-2, 7-1, one of them, the one with Kierstead, and 6-2, and you add up all the acreage, right now, half of the acreage is turfed and half of the acreage is grass. And if we turf Roosevelt Park, it's gonna be 60% turf and 40% real grass. And that's not okay.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ron for a couple of Zoom participants.
Okay, our next is a comment and a question. It's from Siobhan Callahan. Siobhan says, it would be great if the students at Salemwood School had access to a grass field. She's in favor of the project, but if it was grass, not turf. And her question is, how was it determined that a grass field could not be maintained?
All right. Who from the panel would like to take that one?
So when we analyze a field, we know that we're going to do some sort of athletic field. And so at the beginning of design, there are options, right? We can look at synthetic, we can look at natural grass, and there's variations of natural grass. There's native topsoil, there's sand caps, there's full sand base, you know, all these different options. A natural grass field here is going to require more maintenance than the city does right now to keep it in good condition. And even with the proper amount of maintenance goes way beyond just mowing. We need to be watering, we need to be fertilizing, we need to be aerating, we need to be deep tine aerating. And then we need to be shifting play around the field to reduce those high wear areas. In the plan that I had up previously, you can see we're pretty limited with the space that we have to move field space around. So those high use areas, they can't move, we can't really shift them. As we think about those hours of usage, that maintenance that I just mentioned, with that, we can have a good grass field that can support somewhere 400 to 600 hours of use. When we do the math and we think about, hours of play from about 4 to 8 at night during the weekdays, and then let's say around 8 hours of use kind of Saturday, Sunday between, 8 and 8, it comes out over like the 33 weeks that you're really outside playing for the kind of spring, summer, fall seasons. It's about 1,350 hours of use. And so you can see right there that natural grass field isn't going to maintain that type of heavy use. Now we could say, you know what, we don't need a good field. We're okay with a fair field, all right? But the studies and the math shows that a fair field can support about, 600, 800 hours of use. So we're still far over that. So we're gonna have to give up, or the programs in Malden, people are gonna have to decide what programs aren't gonna be able to use those fields. When are we going to take that field offline in order to rest the grass and not use it at all? So those are the things that we thought about. The idea, and we go back to that open space and recreation plan, is Malden needs more field space. But as you know, in an urban environment, there's not a lot of additional field space to get, right? And so we have to have that balance between our natural grass fields. You guys have a good amount of natural grass fields in the city as well, and balancing that with the synthetic turf. So when we think about, it's not just about making Roosevelt synthetic turf, it's also saying, you know what, we're gonna do better at our grass fields, because we're gonna say, you know what, we're gonna take some of you, heavy rainstorm, a wet spring, we can say we're gonna put that use off of our grass fields, let them rest, let them recover, let them grow, right? And put that use on the synthetic turf. And so we look at the numbers to figure out what that balance is. And in this instance, synthetic turf makes the most sense.
Okay, our next question is from Rachel Sorlian. If you are a neighbor of Roosevelt Park and had children who like to play at it, would you choose to install an artificial turf field or a grass field at the park? I believe this is what the issue distills down to. Quality of life for the residents of this city, specifically the residents near Roosevelt Park and students at the Salemwood School. Is the installation of an artificial turf field intended to benefit the surrounding neighborhood, or is it to benefit the city as a whole? It is the latter. Can you find a location for an athletic turf field in Malden that is in a much less densely populated area? And then a follow-up. What organizations, sports leagues, etc., other than the Salemwood School, would be using the turf field? Are these groups based out of neighborhoods surrounding Roosevelt Park?
Hello, everybody. We're talking about the usage of Roosevelt Park. We have Pop Warner that uses it. We have Malden Youth Soccer, Youth Softball uses it. Malden Youth Lacrosse will use it. And we run an adults women's softball league that also uses it. So it does get used by Malden organizations when it's available.
Thank you, Joe. The other thing I would add is the question was, does this park benefit citywide or the neighborhood? And in fact, this project benefits both the city, the whole city overall, and the neighborhood. Former Councilor Anderson spoke about how this, when he lived on Plaisted Road, this park was his neighborhood park. The residents will benefit from this project, as will the city overall. The immediate abutters will benefit from increased floodplain capacity, and of course, a park that they can play in and that can sustain more use and that is not degrading. And citywide, every user of athletic parks will benefit because it will help take the pressure off on the demand, where we see all of our parks are just getting so much use, more than they can support and sustain.
And Rachel's address was 17 Clyde Street, by the way, for the record. Our next question is from Sylvia Cruz. Actually, she goes by Sylvia Avia. I live at 17 Harvard Street. I have 2 teenagers who love playing soccer on turf field. They have played soccer since the day they reached the age to play soccer from Malden Youth Soccer. They are elated to know that there is a possibility to have a turf field. And I'll move on to the next. One moment. The next question or comment is from Isadel Eddy. Has the city seen detailed data about the contents of Brockville and its performance? Have you reviewed information about non-metal chemicals, in parentheses, for both Brockville and the artificial blades of turf, such as VOCs, SVOCs, PFAS, and PAHs? Have you consulted with TURI, Toxins Use Reduction Institute, at UMass Lowell? If so, would you share any of the findings publicly? Also, what is the city's plan when Brockville's 10-year warranty ends? And I understand Brockville's is cooler than crumb rubber infill, but how does it compare to natural grass? And I'll keep this active because there are a lot of questions in there. I'd be happy to reread them if you need them.
So I think the first part was about heavy metals and things like that in synthetic turf components, right? Okay, so, and you guys can jump in as well.
I'm
but-
sorry, could you just pull that mic just a little
Oh,
closer?
sure.
Yeah,
I don't know that I can.
if you can.
Let me close that. There we go.
Thank you.
I'm always told I'm super loud, Ron. I don't know. Okay. So the studies to date, studies for synthetic turf infilled synthetic turf really began back in the very late 90s. Around this area, it was in Danahy Park, I think, was one of the first ones in Massachusetts. And there have been studies, and the studies are showing that from the heavy metals, from health and environmental, impacts, that everything is below risk. Nothing is zero, because nothing can ever be zero, but the risk of, health issues and environmental issues throughout, looking at the chemicals in the turf, looking at the chemicals in the potential infill, thinking about the different components of the carpet. It's not just the fibers, there's other pieces, there's the carpet backing, just like carpets through your homes and things like that. So the studies that we review, which the really important part is that they're peer-reviewed scientific studies. It's not just one study that hasn't been reviewed and then gets posted, has shown that the environmental and human health impacts are very low risk. Anything to add?
No, I completely concur. I completely concur, Meg. Well said.
There was also a question about I think it was about warranty or after the 10 years as well. Let me just find that. Oh, and they asked about the Toxins and Reductions Institute, if you consulted with them, and if so, would you share the data? And then the last question was the city's plan when Brockville's 10-year warranty ends.
In terms of Turi, we usually converse with people in the American Sports Builders Association, as well as, toxicologists like Jay Peters here. So we don't have anything to report, I don't think, on Turi. I think it's probably available on Turi's website if people want it. And then as for the warranty, I don't know if that's me or... Okay, so synthetic turf fields are typically warranted for 8 to 10 years, depending on the final system. They're typically lasting somewhere in that 10 to 12 year range. I'm doing some fields now, some replacements that are in the 15 to 17 year range. So it really, a lot of it goes into the maintenance of the field. But upon resurfacing, what's good is, it's more of a, I don't want to say it's a minimal cost, but it's a lot less than the initial installation cost. The initial installation has to do all the earthwork. It has to bring in the drainage base, all these layers coming up towards the top surface. What we're proposing here is the infill, the carpet, and then a pad. So we're actually able to keep the carpet a little bit shorter. And when we remove the field, we're not buying a new pad. That pad is actually going to be warranted, I think it's for 17 years at a minimum. And so we're going to be able to reuse, that pad at least 2 life cycles of the synthetic turf. So we're really just, when the field is ready for replacement, we're just replacing the carpet and the infill up top. Sure, just about disposal. So the organic infill can actually be composted. So that will actually, upon resurfacing, there's machinery that goes in and actually takes out that infill and puts it into bags, and that can actually be composted, and there's various ways that's beginning to happen. The carpet itself can be repurposed and recycled. We're told that the synthetic turf industry is bringing a true recycling plant to the U.S. There are plants in Europe right now that companies are beginning to try and mimic. So right now what happens, at this moment in time, carpets can be basically harvested and they can be reused in other places. Sometimes they are taken, they are kind of melted down and put into other kind of second use products of plastic. So that industry, I think, is going to be evolving by the time this carpet is ready to be resurfaced.
And then, I think, was that, yeah, one from there, excuse me. Okay, Mary asks, turf will not be home to insects and other wildlife that are important to healthy environment. It's plastic, so where does it get disposed of, which I think was just covered actually in the previous question. How much will it cost to dispose of and replace? Why aren't the other natural grass fields like Forestdale Park wearing out if using them is so detrimental?
Joe, can you explain the type of use that's on that park and how it's programmed differently than Forestdale Park?
Forestdale Park is a Little League diamond, basically, used sometimes by the Forestdale students and for challenger baseball. Very rarely is it used for Little League baseball. They use other parks. It's really not that used. So if you do go by there and you see it's in good shape, it's because of not being used. Whereas Roosevelt Park was constantly being used by many organizations.
Okay, we're going to toggle back to in-person. I'm going to quickly note just up front that it's 7:52. I know this is scheduled to end at 8 o'clock. We do have 5 more people on the sign-in sheet. Just a quick check-in from the panelists. Are you okay to keep it going a little bit longer? And how about from the interpreters from Rosetta Languages? Thumbs up, oh, thank you guys. The Rosetta is fantastic. All right, so our next up in person, Kathy Sullivan. Turn on your mic, Kathy.
Hi, my name is Kathy Sullivan. I am a retired science teacher. I taught at the Salemwood School. I taught 5th grade science for almost well, 20 years. I live at 27 Oliver Street in Malden. I've lived here my whole life. I'm here today to really talk to you as a science teacher. So there are many layers, as we talked about, to this Roosevelt Park issue. As a science teacher, I was tasked with teaching my students about ecosystems, preserving our environment, and climate change mitigation. I was also tasked with teaching students who are primarily English language learners, economically disadvantaged, and racially diverse. I'm here today to say that their voices were not heard during the designing and planning of this project. And what happened here was an environmental injustice. I taught the Massachusetts Curriculum Science Standards, which required me to teach our students about the human impact on our environment. Part of our lessons included reducing the use of plastic, which is polluting our city streets, choking our oceans and waterways. This project adds a heat island and thousands of pounds of plastic waste. It is not being recycled with any purpose. It is being rolled up and dumped in landfills, and that's where it remains and breaks down into our soil and into our waterways. Removing the grass at Roosevelt Park is removing an ecosystem. Our children understand this. This park is a living ecosystem, which includes not only grass, but the roots, the microbes, worms, birds, insects, butterflies, dragonflies. I taught many lessons at recess, teaching them about this ecosystem. Next, I want to say is that climate change and its consequences are real. It's no longer questionable or widely debated in the science community or amongst science educators.
10 seconds.
Okay. I just wanted to say quickly that I went over to Somerville, to the Brockville field, and I chose a 77-degree day. It was cloudy and sunny. The sun came out. I had my heat sensor gun, and the temperature rose quickly, 97, 104. After 5 minutes, it was 122 degrees at 12 o'clock, when children are going to be on it every single day for recess. Please think about that. Those kids matter.
Thank you. What?
Sorry, Charlie, did you want to speak about the recess?
Sure, thank you, Kathy, and we respect the time that you put in at the Salemwood School. I would agree that it can heat up fast. However, how many 77-degree days do we have? You know, so we're, yeah.
All right, folks, I'm just going to ask that we can get through so we can actually get to the people who signed up.
Sure. Shall I finish? Point being is we'll have throughout the year a lot more usage and the ability to go out in the field specifically for phys ed and recess, period.
Next up in person, we've got Chris Simonelli. Chris will be followed by Amy Friedman. Counselor, can I just get you to? Chris, it's for the folks on Zoom and the folks, it's doing, talking to the mic.
Thank you all for coming. I like to see a nice crowd here so everybody can stress their opinions. I'm Chris Simonelli. I live in 90 Bowden Street in Ward 7. And, you know, I was a city councilor prior to being a city councilor now. I was city councilor for 10 years, and 98 to 2008. So I empathize with the situation that's going on here today because I kind of inherited the Fairway Green saga back then. And I'll tell you, what the big thing was then was they thought that the school was going to be turned into condominiums and it was never going to be built into a park. And look, the decision was made when I got into office. There wasn't really much I can do about it. But what I did say to the folks and made the promises to them and said, listen, we need to work together to make the best park we possibly can for our neighborhood and for our city and for the children. And people actually, after they got over being a little aggravated and mad, they actually did it. And today we've got the beautiful Lincoln Commons down there on Cross Street. So it did come true. Look, and I'm not here to sit here and the same thing happened this time too. I get elected and I kind of inherited this situation here. It's not my ward, but it borders my ward. And I don't know all the particulars with the degrees and the hot, and I've been in for 6 months. I'm working on like so many projects in my neighborhood. I don't have time to poke my nose in other people's neighborhood. That being said, I got to say that the people that are working on this project, I can say personally, you know, Councilor Winslow. I mean, the guy's one of the most environmental friendly guys I've ever met. And, you know, he's working on this project, and he's working hard, and he rolls up his sleeves.
And we're going to remind folks in the audience to please be respectful and give grace and space to the people who are speaking.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, Barbara Murphy, Council Ward 5. I mean, listen, her work ethic, she doesn't leave a rock unturned.
She's about 10 seconds, Chris.
I know, but I'm gonna take it all. So you owe me two because you kept interrupting me. But listen, and on a personal note, because I know Barbara Murphy very well, and she did help me out when I hit some bad times. So, you know, I know her personally and the work that she does. So, in the mayor's office, I mean, come on, the mayor, all the work that he does in this city, and all the parks and the millions of dollars that he has got for this city and brought in, I mean, they're working hard to get what they need to get.
All right,
And
Counselor.
look, wait, hold on. I just want to talk about something else. You know, you talk about
Counselor, I hate to be rude, but I'm going to cut you off because you already passed the kneel and kneel time. So, and I'm going to bring up Amy Friedman, who is our next speaker. You are at 2 minutes and 50 seconds. You've passed the kneel and kneel mark that... Thank you so much. If I could just get you to turn the... Thank you, Amy.
Good evening, Amy Friedman. I live at 8 Marvin Street. I prepared a few comments, but based on listening to people, and I don't want to repeat things that other people have said, but you know, it's not fair to characterize this as a bunch of environmentalists against people who want their kids to play sports, or to say that we don't want children to have good sport and recreation facilities in the city, if we are against artificial turf. My son, who was 8 years old at the time, got the amazing opportunity to play soccer on Patriots Field, and he broke his wrist. So probably one of the best maintained artificial fields that there is. So I certainly have personal experience related to the higher level of injuries that occur on that type of surface. My other son is a high schooler, a senior in high school who plays for the Malden High School lacrosse team. So I appreciate the need for these kids to have surfaces to play on, but some of us as parents are worried about our children playing on an artificial turf surface. We think that more injuries result on that surface, and we're worried about the heat. I've spent many hours sitting on an artificial turf surface at Pine Banks Park watching lacrosse games, and I can, you know, attest to the level of heat on those fields. And so that's a big concern of ours. Another thing that's come up that's interesting is, I don't know if you've looked at historical data related to the use of this park. And one, I think, Mr. Levine, I think you spoke about the type of usage. What type of usage will there be? Because, you know, my son plays top soccer, which is for the disabled children. So that type of usage is probably not going to be the same as, you know, the high schoolers playing lacrosse on that field. Have we looked at those things? I mean, I really feel like we should be able as a city to maintain real grass at Roosevelt Park and still have it programmable, but not programmed so much that it's not available to the citizens and the neighbors of that park that need that space, that green space. Thank you.
Thank you. Next resident is Brian DeLacy. Turn back on the podium. That's all yours.
Hi there, I'm Brian DeLacy. I live at 1 Earl Street in Malden. Thanks for having this meeting. It's really great to see the turnout. I gave my address. I'd like to give here the address of each of you, where you live. And I'll pick that up after the meeting because I think the majority of you do not live in Malden. One of the concerns I've had for a long period of time, oh, by the way, the other thing that's a differentiator between me and you, you're paid to be here. I'm not. Most of the people in this room are not. Big concern of mine has been the utilization of the field citywide. I've looked and scrutinized and compared the permits and the schedule. I'm sorry, Laura and Joe, you know what you've been through accumulating and gathering that information. Fields are underutilized. And for all the things that I've heard said here tonight, which are at best stretches in some cases of the truth, Joe was actually the truthful one who said, look at Forestdale. It's underutilized because it's no longer used for Little League baseball. Convert that over to soccer. Why not? So I think another thing that's come up a lot is the flooding and the puddling and all that kind of stuff. And those of us who have looked at it closely after storms, during rainy weather, it just simply isn't true. So when it comes right down to it, I think all of our statements have to stand the test of time and they have to be proven to be true or not. And ultimately it's not, do I like Barbara Murphy or Gary Christensen or the people on the panel, including those who aren't from Malden, who designed this solution for all of us. Really what it comes right down to is what's the right thing to do for the residents of Malden, and particularly the children of Malden. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a lot in there that I want to respond to some of it, and I know some other panelists will want to respond as well. I'm a Malden resident. I work for the city. I love the city. I think we can all agree we're here because we care about the city, even if we don't agree on the proposed solution. And I think we can say that that's a fair thing, and we shouldn't be attacking our consultant team. We don't hire consultant teams because they have residents who live in Malden or don't. We hire the best teams we can get at the lowest cost under a state procurement law. So that's that. And I know there are other points that were brought up about the fields being underutilized. I'm sure our rec director can speak about that and speak about how they are not being underutilized and we're squeezing people into the fields that we do have. And then the flooding and puddling question, I don't know if someone from the design team wants to take that as well.
So on the field at Forestdale, Forestdale's a Little League diamond, and I guess on the big plan that we had 7 years ago, the request was for multi-purpose fields. Roosevelt Park is too small for a multi-purpose field. Forestdale is probably too small for a multi-purpose field. That's why it doesn't get used as often as Linden, Roosevelt, Deva Park, and sometimes Amherst Park. That's the big thing nowadays with, the people that I know around here. The question I ask, what can we do? What kind of program can we set up? And a lot of them are for multi-purpose fields, which is, people from the cricket programs call, they want to use our fields. It wouldn't work at Forestdale. It wouldn't work at Bruce Field or Kierstead Park. It would work at Roosevelt. It would work at Linden, parks like that. So, everybody knows Little League baseball numbers are down. But we do have Little League diamonds. But there's not much you could do with those Little League diamonds but play baseball or softball in there. If there was a bigger area, we could convert them into multi-purpose fields to accommodate lacrosse, soccer, and all those other programs, but they're just too small. Linden Park has 2 baseball diamonds. The only time we use that is for adult softball league that's been in the city for 80 years. We have to use that for soccer and mostly soccer and lacrosse occasionally practices there. So the big thing is the multi-purpose fields that we're really in need of drastically. And Roosevelt Park would be a great addition, and I can add new programs to the multi-purpose field, which would accommodate, and, you know, a lot of the citizens, adults and children. You know, I talk about volleyball. Volleyball is big in Malden now, and I don't know if Councilor Simonelli's still here, but they used his park, actually it was Miller Park, to play volleyball. And I got a call from somebody saying, you got to come down here, they're ruining the field, the grass field. And I went down there, and the field was a mess because they used it about 8-9 days in a row. So I think a turf field can accommodate recreational volleyball, whereas a grass field can't. And that's one of our big wants nowadays. So I think that might have answered some of the questions.
All right, so we're going to toggle over to Ron to take some comments and questions from Zoom for about 10 minutes.
Okay, our next comment is from Councilor Craig Spatafora, Council President. Investing in building a turf field in Malden aligns with our community investment priorities beyond the walls of the Salemwood area, while reinforcing our commitment to create healthier communities. As you mentioned, Malden is currently upgrading Dever, Trafton, and in the process of major investments at Kierstead, Fellsmere, and Patchell Parks, all which will remain grass fields and include additional tree plantings. Exercise is a crucial component to living healthy lifestyles and is also a great way to improve one's mental and physical health. This community field offers a new space to keep boys and girls in the community active and away from other potential distractions and negative influences. Malden has invested heavily in the past 3 years in upgrading and expanding our recreational spaces, and we will continue to do so. This field is another superb addition to our inventory, creating a quality turf field for people of all ages in Malden to enjoy. It also supports the fastest growing sport in Malden, which is soccer. Soccer has become a very socioeconomic, difficult place to get in. It is a very upper middle class sport where most of the clubs are tuition based. The rich communities have access to some of the best facilities in the area. Malden has one dedicated turf facility for younger children and shares the other with Melrose. I have personally witnessed the underrepresentation of low-income communities in elite soccer. The richer communities, or pay-to-play, have enabled minorities and females to have more opportunities. The intersection of race and social class leave women, especially women of color, to be disproportionately left out of opportunities. As you are aware, Malden has a large immigrant population and often get involved in the community through soccer programs, providing access to parks and recreational opportunities for all members of the community, providing premier soccer facilities, coaching and playing opportunities for children and families living in underserved urban communities like Malden, and greater access to the game, with the hope of changing the landscape of sports in the U.S. by creating a greater socioeconomic diversity on field. Last paragraph.
I think we're going to have to cut off Councilor Spatafora. It really is the councilors
Does he
in the
get the
room.
council time, though? The 3 minutes.
He is at the Neil,
All right.
Chris, Karen, everybody time.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to.
Last paragraph. Black, Latino, Middle Eastern, low wealth immigrants are all common identities of soccer players loved by the world. We all agree is crucial for vitality and health, but natural grass is not viable in every open space. Yes, I forgot that I was still on the clock. Okay, next question. Amelia T, sorry I tuned in late. She's asking, why are you sacrificing a school's playing field for an unnecessary quest for perfect playing conditions for youth soccer in a location that already suffers from heat island? This seems like groupthink. Please reconsider.
I can respond to the heat island portion of that, and then maybe the rec department can speak briefly about the need for the new field. I know we've talked about that all evening, so I'll be brief. Heat island is a citywide challenge requiring a citywide solution. We are following all of the steps we need to do to help mitigate that, including planting more trees, including addressing rooftops, including thinking about splash pads at different parks around the city. There's always more we can do. Our climate action plan will help spell out what those things are and help us think strategically about how we're going to do that, not just bit by bit, but doing it as a citywide solution. So we are addressing heat island in that way.
Okay, next question is from Vu. Sorry again, apologies for pronunciation. How will the parking situation be handled during games for Dell Street and surrounding streets? Residents around the area have limited parking on streets during games.
I'll take that one. Thank you, everybody, again for coming. And I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight, especially the people from the volunteers from the youth programs that came tonight who volunteered their time to come out on a Thursday night and spend 2-3 hours here helping out. You go above and beyond what you do, and I want to thank you again. What was the question?
It was about the parking situation.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
There is a permit process that we have, and it all goes through Laura Perez and myself. And the person that requests a permit, just for instance, Little League, Malden Youth Lacrosse, and along with that permit, we will also issue something on the bottom that says parking available under the Salemwood School. So we don't encourage, and we actually tell them not to be parking on Dell Street. So we make sure that the parking is underneath in the Salemwood School. And the evening parking is pretty good because the teachers are out of school and they're able to park under there. It doesn't work that way all the time. We do have people who don't want to park under there, and we get calls and we talk to the people that we issued the permit to, and we explain to them the situation, and they take care of it. That's about all on that.
This next is from Joan Coburn. I grew up in Malden. I'm a nurse, and I'm very much opposed to artificial turf. I live in the direct neighborhood, Hyde Street. I love sports. My son played football for Malden High. My son contracted MRSA, playing on turf in college, which has caused continuous complicated problems for him. We are in an extremely dangerous time directly related to climate change. Why would we increase the heat index to my neighborhood? Yeah, the heat island's been covered substantially, so we're going to move on to the next question. It's from Martine Pierre-Louis. I think that after 20 years of living with a lead-contaminated field, the least the city can do is properly clean that field. Our community deserves that at least. Simply covering the field with turf does not and will not solve the underlying problem.
Yep. It's been said before that the city knew about this for 20 years, and how could they let that happen? I'm not aware of that. I can tell you that our first sampling effort was in 2014, and as stated previously, all of the concentrations of everything that we detected were consistent with DEP's background levels and therefore not regulated. That was 20 holes. We went back in 19 and 20 and put in another 116 sampling locations. And that's when we found the problem that is now fenced in. And I want to point out something, that all across the field, that those 136 sample locations, there's been a grassy cover as the direct contact layer, if you will. The urban fill is below that cap, that 4 to 6 inches of material. And typically, because last time we went with depth for fencing and things like that, the levels are down 8-9 feet, the highest levels. This was filled back when the railroad came through. I mean, that was common practice all throughout Malden. And so the urban fill that's there, a lot of it is coal pots, coal ash, wood ash, that kind of residual. But I think it's important to note that there is a grassy direct contact barrier all across the site, and we did not find any indications that the urban fill was at surface grade. Thank you.
All right, we're going to toggle back to in-person. There are actually only 2 in-person left from the sign-up sheet. Our first is Laura Thompson, followed by Stephen Winslow. And then if we have time, we'll jump back to Zoom. I apologize in advance. The folks on Zoom will try to get to as many as possible. We do have a hard stop with the interpreters of 8:30, so we'll do our best. But Laura, let me put on the mic for you.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that I love sports too. I had 2 children. Is it not on? This, like here? Is that better? All right. I'll put it up a little. Sorry, I'm short. But I have 2 children, Ali Alian and Yasmin Alian, that both play basketball. Huge sports fan. I love what it teaches the kids. So no problem with sports at all. I was listening to someone talk about balance. I think that that's really an interesting place, and the word stuck with me, so I just want to talk about that for a minute. The City of Malden citywide total acreage of natural green space is 177.4 acres, and 73% of that green space is located in 4 precincts, 130.3 acres. The remaining 20 precincts have 47.1 acres of natural green space between them and 5 artificial turf fields. There are 8 precincts with not 1 acre of public natural grass space. So if Roosevelt Park is converted to an artificial turf field, precinct 5-1 will join those precincts devoid of any natural grass space. And as Malden residents concerned about environmental justice for all residents of our community, we want to try to strive to provide equal opportunities to access open, natural, green space for our local communities and limits to environmental burdens for all families in all of Malden. So equity and balance is what we should be striving for if we're looking for environmental justice. The goal should be to make sure that all families in Malden have an equal share of environmental benefit and environmental burdens, and not the burdens be placed in one area of the city and the benefit be placed in the other. So, many in the environmental justice movement believe that we should work towards eliminating all environmental burdens in all communities. The idea, it sounds compelling, but at a minimum, we should start by not disproportionately forcing environmental hazards upon disempowered communities.
About 10 seconds.
Every Malden resident, man, woman, and child, must have equitable access to local natural grass and not have it taken away from them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Steve Winslow, and I apologize for interrupting everyone as they're going with my bedtime magic voice. Actually, Steve, before you, I think, Joe, you wanted to respond? Or somebody wants to respond?
Could you just talk about the other grass fields in the area?
Yeah, in that area, like Chris Simonelli said, we do have Lincoln Commons and Kierstead Park and Miller Park. You know, and those get used for soccer, and Neil Anderson and myself had a little conversation about that a few years back about being overused. We like to leave those parks as passive parks where you can bring your baby and, you know, you walk across the field in Miller Park or pull out a blanket and hang out. You know, we do have some great green space in that area. And again, I'm gonna say this while I'm here. I do care about the kids just like everybody else here does. And I see, you know, I use Pop Warner as an example. They go to practice at Pine Banks in August, starting in August. Those kids usually don't get rides. They usually walk there. And, you know, that's a dangerous thing, getting there to walk there with their big brothers or on bicycles or whatever. That's an accident waiting to happen. If we had this turf field, and again, I use it because it's going to be used a lot. That's why we want to see a turf. But that keeps them safer also. Knowing that they could go out their backyard, come out off Eastern Ave, cross the street, and then they're right there where they are. When I plan programs, I try to bring them into the middle of the city. And that's one of my plans, is to bring it into the middle of the city.
Thank you. And I'm gonna turn the mic on for Steve Winslow, who I'll preemptively say will be the first counselor to take 2 minutes.
All right, thanks. So Councilor Winslow, 83 Jacob Street, I serve Ward 6. So thank you so much for everyone to come out. I know there's different points of view on this project. There have been since we've done these meetings, even starting back in 2017 when Councilor Murphy and I were part of the open space planning team. So I thank you all for coming out. I do strive to listen, and I do respect, and I appreciate people who have raised concerns and have had an impact as to the shape of this project. I also want to say that I often observe in the community, and I want to recognize someone who couldn't be here tonight who did send a note in favor of the project, Annabette Tremont. She said, unfortunately, I work a night job tomorrow. I'm a single parent, or else I would have come tonight. I live down the street to Salem. I've lived down the street from Salemwood most of my life. So there's people here who can't be here who have spoken in favor of this. And one of the things my perspective, there is the great open space right next to this field, the Northern Strand Trail that I worked on very closely. And my wife, who's here tonight, we just enjoy seeing that. That's a 30-year project and it's just so pleasurable to see that being used equitably, the great range of families and people using that. And so I think that's a great thing. I think it's so important that we as a community, we talk about pursuit of happiness. And knowing kids, I was even in Trafton Park, there was a family, the girls had just come from Afghanistan, playing with my granddaughter. And knowing that these kids that have gone through the trauma of having to leave their countries and maybe war can come to Malden and play on a safe playground, play on a field, that's something we show as a nation, that offering the opportunity to pursue happiness is an example that we all set. So I personally think this project as a whole will benefit the most people. I know it's great when we can have something that can please everybody, that doesn't happen, but I think we've done what we can to meet as much as we can, but I think on the whole this will benefit the most people in Malden. So thank you very much for coming out, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Councilor. So it is 8:26, and I'm actually going to turn off the podium mic. It is 8:26, so I'm going to turn it over just quickly to the panel if anybody has any final thoughts, comments they'd like to make.
Thank you. I have a couple thoughts. So firstly, this was a wonderful conversation, and I'm glad that everyone came out and that we had this conversation, because I think it's important that this is how we engage on topics like this in the community. I think it's where we are at our best. I know there are a lot of things that smart and informed people can disagree with each other about on this park. There was one thing that that was said. There's a woman who brought up the redlining maps, and those are so important. Those are maps that we should be talking about, and they're plastered in my brain every day. And I think I know in our department we look at these maps a lot, and the maps show the effect of racist housing policies from decades ago and how that maps on to the built environment today. And so we were looking at Heat Island was the portrait, the image that was brought up on stage was that, comparing those two. We also look at that in terms of affordability. We look at it in terms of where people are living. If you look at the racial dot map that we put up earlier, that's a part of it as well. It was stated that we feel that, or this person said that the city feels that this is not our problem because it wasn't our fault. This is absolutely our problem. Racial equity is absolutely our problem as a city, and we are doing a lot, and we want to do more, and there's more we're not doing, and you should tell us to do those things, and we will do our best. The challenge is this. We could, someone said that every time you build an apartment building, you're affecting Heat Island. That's true. Every time we don't build an apartment building, we're affecting housing justice. So it is about balancing these things. We could say, okay, we never want to build, or we never want to buy as a city anything that we can't recycle. which would mean we could never purchase another vehicle. We could never purchase markers for classrooms. No one is suggesting these things. I'm just pointing out that the way that we address these issues are in tension with each other. Racial justice and making, addressing heat islands, addressing housing needs, addressing recreational needs. We heard that a lot of the soccer players are from low-income neighborhoods and are overly representing people of color. So we want to make sure that we're serving those people too, and that is in tension with that issue about the heat island. And those are real issues. And again, these are areas where I think as an informed public, we can talk and disagree about them. But I really want to state that we acknowledge, we accept, we agree that issues of racial justice are our problem. In the coming weeks, we'll be talking more about a racial equity audit that the city is going to be embarking upon. There are a lot of things that we are doing. We need to be doing more, but I want to just say for the record that we know this is a problem and we're taking it very seriously.
So, just on the outset, I just want to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight and echo what the mayor said at the very beginning, which is that you're only here because you care about the city, one way or another. That's the only reason you're here, is you cared enough to show up and you cared enough to have deep feelings and opinions about this. So my school committee colleagues make fun of me because I say grace and space a lot, but I do seriously thank you for the grace and space you gave each other tonight. Appreciate the invitation, I think, to moderate this. And I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Burke for our last word.
So there's just a couple of things, because it came up a couple of times tonight, that I just want to clarify or correct some misinformation that's out there. There was a public engagement process with this park. It goes back to 2017 when I chaired the Open Space and Recreation Committee. We held focus groups, we did surveys, we met over at the YMCA, we met at other community centers where people across this community gather. From that document, as some of the soccer folks said, soccer and the needs for those children to get, what's due them, playtime on parks was front and center in that recreation plan. We went from that series of public meetings, which that plan took over a year, maybe a year and a half to get done. We then went into the Roosevelt Park Improvement meeting. There were probably 4 or 5 meetings in front of the Community Preservation Commission, all of which were public. There were at least 3 times up at bat before the Malden City Council. All of those were in public. There were maybe 2 or 3 times before the City Council's Finance Committee to vet the bonding that we had to do. And then we went back to the Finance Committee to vet the Section 108 loan that we're borrowing from HUD. So I can't sit here and say that there was not a public engagement effort, because there really were. And at that design unveil, we translated flyers as were requested. We distributed all to the school students. That went out on Connect Ed. So maybe we're doing community engagement a little more robust now. You learn as years go by, but it's not right to say that there was no community engagement on this project.
Speaking of community engagement, as we close out, just one last thank you to Danielle Najmi and the folks at Rosetta Languages. They're actually in the room behind us, if you want to give them a round of applause. Our OSPCD staff who are here, our language access coordinator, Elena Martinez, but you can go and give them a high five on your way out the door. And thank you so much for coming out tonight. Be safe, take care.
Recording.
Wow, that was that.